Hello, everybody. It's Between Two Priests again. And this year, it is 2020. It's fine. This week, we have a very special guest. This is Sister Madeline Mary from the community of St. Mary, Southern Province. She's going to talk to us about religious vocations in the Episcopal Church. And today is actually the day that the church remembers Constance and her companions, which is kind of the foundress of this order. So I will hand it off to Sister Madeline Mary for the beginning of this.
Okay, well, I thought you were going to ask me questions, but all right. How did the order get started? All right. Well, actually, Constance and her companions are not the founders of our community. Okay. Harriet Starr is, and the community was founded in 1865. But by 1873, Bishop Quintard was asking Mother Harriet, they were friends, to send some sisters to Memphis to start a girls' school. And so 4 sisters were sent. Constance was one of those. And they lived in the bishop's house, and they lived next to the St. Mary's Cathedral. And they started working on creating a girls' school. But shortly thereafter, the yellow fever epidemic once again hit Memphis. It hit Memphis 3 times within the course of 10 years. And this, unfortunately, was the most virulent time. And actually, at the time that it really hit hard, all the sisters weren't there. They were back in New York, having a vacation from the terrible weather of Memphis. And, it's very humid there. And especially if you're wearing a full habit that goes to the floor. And in New York, they were situated on the Hudson River, so there was a nice breeze. But they quickly got told that this outbreak had occurred yet again, and that it was significant this time. And so the sisters had to make a choice as to whether or not they would stay in New York and be safe, or they would go back. And they chose to go back. About 30,000 people left Memphis as soon as they could. But there were still about 20,000 people left that could not escape. And a lot of those were Black people. Unfortunately, the reality is the yellow fever epidemic might have not happened if we had not had slave trade. And because it was brought over on the slave ships. And yellow fever attacked not just the South, but the North as well, because that's where the ships were made. And, but it was terrible. Oftentimes the sisters were educated in girls, finishing schools, if they had any further education after high school, whatever that meant then. But they were not trained as nurses at all. Nobody knew where the yellow fever epidemic started. They didn't have our concepts of sanitation today as we have today. I mean, we at least know a little bit more about the pandemic than they did. They didn't know anything. They thought that burning tar in the streets would purify the air, which, just made it worse. And so suddenly these sisters who expected to be teachers became nurses with no training whatsoever. And a few priests came. I think it's important for Southerners to remember, and I am a Southerner, I say this as a Southerner, that most of these sisters were actually from the North. So it was Northern sisters coming into the fray in the South, and sometimes Schuyler, Father Schuyler, or Schuyler, depending on how you pronounce that, was also from New Jersey. And they were doctors. So they gave what training they could. The sisters ministered to the sick and the dying. And oftentimes they would go into homes and find the parents already dead and the children sitting there. That's where the Canfield orphanage comes into the story, which in those days, Canfield was another way of saying orphanage for colored children. And obviously they weren't the only ones that died. So by that time, the Canfield orphanage was used for both races. So whether you liked it or not, you had harmony among the races at that point from the very virus that caused this. And so, you know, I don't think God ever wants us to go through suffering, but God can use suffering for good. And it brought out the heroic side of these sisters to care for the body of Christ, the children of God, whoever they were. And all but one died at a time when the community itself was only about 13 sisters at the time. We lost 4 sisters. The only sister that survived that epidemic was Sister Huberta, who was a Snowden. People that live in Memphis know that name. People live in Sewanee, where I live now, know that name. It is an old Southern name and of a family. And the only reason she didn't die was that she had already had it at a previous time. And so she had the immune system to survive it. And that's how our house actually got founded. Sewanee was a place the sisters came in the summertime in a small house in Sewanee for a respite from the summer heat. But after the yellow fever epidemic, they came to Sewanee and started yet another school for mountain girls. They by that time knew the importance of sanitation, and so they started by teaching domestic arts, and that became it became a high school, a college prep school, and it continued into the 60s. And then the sisters, St. Andrew's School and the military school all joined forces and moved to St. Andrew's campus. And then the sisters went into retreat work, and now we are doing programs at the convent and doing a program we call the Organic Prayer Program. So that's some of that story.
So it's a thought that I hadn't heard before. So religious communities within the Episcopal Church are not something new.
Yeah, they go back to the Oxford movement, actually, in England, the 1840s. We are the oldest Episcopal community in the United States, 1865. And then I think after us comes the Cowley brothers and Sisters of St. Margaret, who were founded in England. We were obviously not.
And St. Gregory's, which has a relationship with our diocese here, was founded in England and then started in northern Indiana.
So is the Society of St. John the Evangelist.
Yes.
Evangelist.
Yeah.
So but that's as far back as we go. We don't have the long history of the Roman Catholic Church, for instance.
Yeah, something called the English Reformation got in the way of that.
It did. It did. Some people would consider that was a plus. One of your priests would probably not be a priest otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So how does, if someone's interested in religious community or wants more information on how to become a sister, what do they do? Do they call you, email you, or come visit? What's the best way to?
All of the above. Usually someone will email me to begin with. They'll go on our website and they'll get into our contact information and they'll send us a message. And Sister Hannah forwards that message to me. And then I usually set up a telephone call or a video chat with that person, find out something about that person and whether or not they are healthy enough, whether or not they are psychologically healthy enough, and under 60. And because those are just the basics. We are a tiny little community in this house. We are only the southern province of St. Mary's. But we have actually had to deal with dying sisters for about 10 years now. This is the first year. We're still in the same. Our last sister died in January. So we're just getting out of that. And now we have a new postulant, and Sister Hannah is coming up for life profession. And those are both young. And we need to be able to balance our life. So, there's some things that would forbid that person from becoming a sister. But if those are not problems, or it's a health issue that can be coped with, by medication or somehow within the community, then okay, that doesn't prevent somebody from becoming a sister.
Right.
The biggest thing is they have to have a sense of God calling them to become a sister. It can't be because, oh, I like that life, or, oh, won't you take care of me? Or, I don't get along with people very well, so can I join your community? Those are not really valid reasons for joining a community.
Yeah, not getting along with people is definitely not a good reason to join
it is not. But you would be surprised how many people that are retired, are coming out of a divorce, or they have health issues where they're afraid for their future. All of that is totally understandable, but it is not the mission of the community to do that. And frankly, people that come at a community with those kinds of expectations are usually very disappointed. I can't tell you how many priests in the past have told me, or not priests, the candidates have told me in an initial telephone call, I'll say, so how did you get to know us? And they'll say, oh, my priest thought it would be a good thing for me to join the religious life. And I said, no, really? So why did your priest? And I'm sorry, but one of the things that I hear often, or have heard in the past, is, well, I've been in and out of a psychiatric ward, and they think that that's a good sheltered place for me. And I end up having to be in the terrible predicament of having to tell these people, I'm sorry they did that to you, because you would be totally unhappy here. And so a person has to be physically and psychologically well enough to discern a vocation. Many people may think they're called for various reasons, And maybe they're not called for that reason at all. And maybe during discernment, they'll find out that, oh, they were mistaken about that. But they still think they might be called because of another reason. You know, it's not that they have to get it right all the time, but they have to live with the community for a little bit. So I always ask a person before we, after that initial telephone call, that they write me a spiritual autobiography. They tell me something about their history. And their work history. We want to know that the person is stable and able actually to dealing with lots of people. Far from being a sheltered life, we live under a microscope. You know, it's like everybody comes into our door. And so you have to be willing and able to get along with people. And we once had an organic prayer intern that was asked to write an article on her experience. And she said, you know, many people think that nuns are removed from the world, that they don't really know anything about real life. And that was not my experience. I would be next to the front door sometimes, and I just watch the entire world come in, you know, and that's actually more like it. Because we have a ministry of hospitality. You know, we welcome all people, regardless of their faith, gender orientation, anything else, you know. And so we start with a telephone call, an initial visit. I ask them to come for a weekend. Then I might ask them to come for a week, you know. And then I listen to the sisters, you know, get some feedback from them of their perceptions of that person. And I talk to the person herself and ask about, you know, how did she feel about this? Did she feel like this was meeting a need that she had? Did she like the rhythm of the life? And could she see herself living in this context? And I give her the rule of St. Benedict to study and our rule. And I do some reflections during their visits so that they get a sense of how we are Benedictine and what the rhythm of our life looks like. And I probably will teach them some chant. And because we do our offices with plainsong, and at the end of a week or so, we might have a further discussion and say, so what was that like for you? You know, do you see that you are more fully yourself in this context than in some other context? I honestly believe that God does not call people to the religious life to give them a stifled life. I think God calls people to the religious life because it is their deepest love, that it is their deepest passion, and that they can be most fully alive in this life. It's not a dead end. So, so after all of that, if the people coming to visit several times, then if they want to do a prolonged visit, perhaps, for instance, we've had a couple of people come to that. We ask the candidate to take psychological tests eventually, and they have to pay for them. I want to know that they are invested in this in some way. And so sometimes they haven't had the money. So they might live alongside us and do some other job and still live with us till they raise enough money to take that test. If they're invested in it, I will do what I can to help them. But there must be a sense of investment and a sense of they think that they can deepen in their spiritual life here. I care about all the gifts that people bring, but I don't choose people to join the religious life because they are a college professor or some such thing. They can do that. They can be that. And that's great. But the deepest thing about call is really whether or not you sense that God is calling you to live this way of life to your benefit and to the benefit of the world. And that you think that you can live a life of ministry that deepens you as a human being and also benefits everyone that comes in contact with you. Not that you're not going to have bad days. Everybody does. You know, I have lived the religious life now for, it's hard for me to believe this, but this is my 50th year. And I tell people, don't think that discernment is about one bad day or even one good day. You know, there are going to be days when you say to yourself, why did I ever do this? You know, what you need to do in that situation is try to center yourself and ask yourself, what if I left? What if I lived somewhere else? Would I be better off? Or would there be a hole in my life?
Lots of lessons from that for just everyday life too, not just in the religious life. What you keep talking about the rhythm of your day, rhythm of your life. What does that typically look like for those who don't know?
Well, right now we've modified that a little bit because of COVID.
Beyond COVID.
Beyond COVID, I usually get up around 5:30 in the morning, and I get dressed and have a cup of coffee and go to chapel for an hour. And I do Lectio or some other form of contemplative prayer. And then we have morning prayer after that. And then we have the Eucharist after that. And then we have breakfast. And anyone that comes to our services is welcome to breakfast with us. This is the South, and a lot of people are not used to silence. And so we have the great silence, and we have silence on Fridays, but on other days, we have what we call talking breakfast because of the guests that are there, unless we're having a retreat day. And after that, a couple of times a week, we have a meeting to discuss, you know, who's going to have the car, when are we doing such and such, you know, just details of the week. And then we have one day when we reflect on our customary or our rule. And on weekends, I do reflections at the noon office on either the rule or the gospel for that day. We have 4 offices a day. Morning prayer is the first one. Then we have a noon office that is at noon, except on weekends when it's at 12:30. And then we have evening prayer at 5 o'clock, and then we have Compline at 7:30. We anticipate Compline with about 10 minutes of prayer and review for our day. That's personal. People are welcome to any of those offices, and we do sing them all. So we use English. We do not use Latin. It's all plain chant. And oftentimes we have a lot of people that show up for either morning prayer or evening prayer. but right now we can't have public offices. So the office itself structures our day, which is very Benedictine. I mean, it used to be in Middle Ages and still is in some more enclosed orders, that they did 7 offices a day. But back in the 60s, the Benedictines had a reform liturgy, and they oftentimes would combine what we call the little hours, terce, sexton, none, into what now exists as the noon office. And in 1979 prayer book in the Episcopal Church, they took on those offices. So we now use the prayer book as instead of a breviary. Before that, we used a breviary, but since the church has taken on those offices, we use that as our structure, but we add antiphons, or we add things that we don't want to lose in our own tradition.
That's a great way that we here can feel connected to you and religious communities,
right?
By doing that. So we've kind of talked about vocations a little bit, but you have 2 other levels or ways to be involved, like with the associates and oblates, and wonder if you
right, right. Yes, those are groups of people who want to be associated with the community, but are married or don't feel called to live a monastic vocation. At least the associates, that's true of. Associates first contact Sister Elizabeth Grace, who's in charge of the associates. And together they come up with a rule of life that is grounded in the great commandments, love your neighbor as yourself, and make God a priority in your life. And how they do that is very personal to that person. But together they come up with a rule of life, and they live that rule of life. They make a commitment as an associate, and they wear their own special medal that has our insignia on it. And then they come to retreats from time to time, or we go to them in various parishes and do retreats for them or quiet days for them. They stay in communication with the Sister for the Associates, and we at least write once a year to say how they're keeping their rule. And then the Oblates are more intense. The Oblates are more like lay monastics in the world. We think of them, we think of both of these bodies as extensions of the community into the world. The Oblates actually go through a formation period of 2 years. And the first year is focused on what is an oblate? Am I called to be one? Can I be one? Because they actually do many of the offices every week that we do. And then the second year is focused on, if they continue, it's focused on, okay, I really do think I am called to be an oblate, and it really helps my life, and I want to help the community. And so they learn about the history of the community, they get some options in what they study. There's a whole course of study. They have to do Lectio Divina every day. They have certain offices each week that they must choose to do. They do a retreat at least once a year. At the convent after they become oblates for a week. And because we wanted oblates to be an incarnational body, we don't just want them to be a virtual community. We want them to actually touch base with the community itself. And they do have the option of, after they become oblates, of wearing an alb that has our insignia and representing us out there when we ask them to. But I think the difference is the associates, it's more to tailored to what your lifestyle is and what you feel like your call is. An associate may be a mother of 5, you know, and juggling all that entails. And they don't have time to sit down and do morning prayer every day or something like that. Whereas an oblate might be like a younger person that actually wants structure for their life. And sometimes we have one oblate that's a priest out there, and he uses that to connect with the community. And when he was going through seminary, he used that as a foundation for his prayer life. So that's a tighter relationship, really, than associates. But associates really determine how tight their relationship with us is going to be, because they can come here and visit as much as they want to. But oblates are required to come for at least a week every year. It used to be that many people would become oblates after they had been associates in their younger life. And as they got towards retirement, they would want to become oblates. Today, that's not so much the truth. Today, I have much younger candidates that want to use it to provide a structure for their life, and incorporate their family into it. We want to be sure that this is not something, if they take on an oblate commitment, we want to be sure their family is okay with that. And that this isn't, creating division. We want it to actually build a stronger, healthy family. So those are 2 associate groups that we have to the community.
And then there's also the organic prayer, which I actually don't know a lot about. I'm surprised since I was there for 3 years. The organic prayer intern program.
Yes, well, that is tailored for young people that are trying to discern what they want to do with their life. And we first started with summer interns. And we called it organic prayer because we wanted to teach them that care for creation was a spiritual matter. It was also a justice matter. And so we wanted them to learn from the earth itself, as well as from the Benedictine rule. So people would ask us, apply to be a summer intern for 9 weeks. And we would teach them about organic gardening. They would study sustainability issues. They would create a contemplative prayer service on a theme. And they would live alongside us and participate in the chapels in morning and evening prayer, learn how to chant, but also have times they have their own house on our property. They learn to live in community, in intentional community. They learned to offer hospitality for the stranger. They have something, right now we can't do it, but normally we have something we call radical hospitality dinners. And they learn how to cook if they don't know how. And they, we grow lavender for Thistle Farms. And that is a group that kind of harkens back to our beginnings, because the first ministry the Sisters of St. Mary were given in New York was to care for, quote, women of the night. and Thistle Farms, of course, is the business aspect of the Magdalene houses that Becca Stevens began. We grow lavender for them for some of their products because of their motto, and because Becca used to come out here to go to chapel from time to time. And so we want to immerse the intern, whether it's a summer intern for 9 weeks or it's a long-term intern for 9 months or 10 months, in prayer life, in care for creation, and learning about the issues surrounding that, but also learn how to actually get their hands dirty. Get into the ground, learn what it's like to care for something that you cannot control. Learn patience from actually caring for plants by weeding every day, or something that is really connected to the earth, not just spiritual la la land out there, but really concrete experience. And as they're doing that, they reflect on the Benedictine rule, and they learn how to apply that to their life. They meet with various sisters in those reflections, and they review what they really have a passion for. Most of the time, the interns come with an idea of what they're going to do with their life. And during that internship, it changes. They slow down. They start, instead of asking, well, what do I want to do? They start asking, what do you think God is actually wanting me to do with my life that would make me greater than I am? And many times, someone who came thinking, oh, I'm going to graduate school right after this, will put off graduate school. Go study agriculture. Go study psychology. Work in a nursing home. Our interns have done everything as they've graduated. Our interns have done everything from become a priest to become an archaeologist. And so we don't try to influence them and, trying to talk them into anything. In fact, and I meet with them periodically, and I try to tell them, look, everybody's going to tell you, oh, you could do this. You could do this. And it's probably true. You could. The question is not, could you do that? The question is, do you have a passion for that? Do you want to put your life on the line for that? Is this something that is going to feed you forever? That you will continue to grow with? If it is, go, do it. And most recently, and when we actually did manage to have 2 interns this summer, one at a time. And one was an undergrad and one was a graduate. One came from Mississippi, one came from Massachusetts. They come from all over the country, and they're not all Episcopalians. The person that we have right now is a Unitarian. Big jump for her into liturgy, but we don't require them to be of a certain faith. We only require them to be open to other people's and to participate in that, to expose themselves to that. And we hope that somehow they will be nurtured by it.
So as I've been listening to all this, couple different just observations, and maybe you can comment on them, but often people think of, when they think of religious communities, they think cloistered, separate, segregated from the community. But you used words with like, you know, the world coming into your space. So, you know, hospitality, you welcome the world in, but also then passion for the religious life. You know, I don't think people would necessarily think, oh, these sisters are passionate, right? That's not a word people would use, but I like that sort of imagery. And it does create a different kind of picture than cloistered does. But then also to be a sister there, you're female, but to be any of the other connected groups to come for an internship, or it could be male or female.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We hope that they will actually be male and female. Our house, the house that they live in, has 2 sides. And so we can accommodate, you know, up to 3 people there. And we have an oblate that lives in a house that we rent nearby. And she's actually had another intern over there. We've had as many as 4 interns at a time. But part of living in community and living in the world, as well as living in a convent, frankly, is learning how to get along with gender differences. You know, and I mean, I've thought it's funny sometimes to watch how I remember one intern, a girl who just graduated from college, and a young man who's now a priest up in New Hampshire, who had been out of college for several years, and he was the other intern. But she would quickly bring him down to earth sometimes, you know, but he had wisdom in some areas that she didn't have. So they feed each other, you know. We want those parallel relationships as well. And so that they learn how valuable community is, you know, how we need each other. And this is not a race to be more important than somebody else. It's about how do you express love across boundary lines, you know? How do you bring people together? I mean, look at our country right now.
Yeah.
We need everybody to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all need a kind of a Benedictine slap.
Yeah.
You know, in Benedict's time, there were people that told him, oh, you're not hard enough. You should be more ascetical, you know? And I mean, one of the ways that focused itself was on the expression, pray without ceasing. And some people took that literally, you know? That means you should say all of the Psalms every day. Well, if you do that, what else do you get done? You know, how do you express charity to anybody? You know, and I don't really, and I don't think Benedict actually bought into that notion that prayer without ceasing is about really being present to life, present to God, breaking into life, being in the center of life. And unfortunately, I think you mentioned the word passion, and I keep on trying to redeem that for people.
And it shows. I mean, you clearly are passionate about it.
It's like, you know, I sometimes when I do retreats, people will say, well, you know, passion can lead you astray. And I said, yeah, that's true. So can boredom.
Absolutely.
You know, this is when you watch a child come up for communion and they're dancing in the aisles. The question is, why are you so long-faced?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you're going to the same table. You're receiving the same God. You know, what have you lost in your life that has taken away that spark?
Yeah.
You know, when people say, "Oh, how could you do this for your life with your life? You know, how could you throw your life away?" I said, "I didn't throw my life away. I'm living it."
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's something that people don't realize. Jesus had passion, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where the importance of dealing with passion is, how do you direct it?
Mm-hmm.
What do you center it on? You know, my novice guardian years ago taught us that you focused passion. It wasn't, you would never not have it, because it's part of being a human being.
Yeah.
Being in right relationship, however, focusing that passion so that it was like a laser beam, rather than dispersed without any boundary, without, you know, she used to say, a banked fire burns hottest. I love that image.
Yeah.
Because it's like, boundaries are not, you know, like a lot of people don't like the word obedience, for instance. They would much rather stick with radical, you know, or something like that. But I try to remind people when we're doing Benedictine reflections, the heart of obedience in Latin is actually listening. It is not about keeping rules. Benedict didn't talk about keeping rules. He used the word in Latin, regula, not lex. Regula means way of life. How do you live into your full potential? That's actually what God desires for us. So being obedient to God is to open yourself to all of that energy flowing through you to make you fully alive. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah. Well, and we forget it too. So it's always good to be reminded.
Yeah.
And you know, having that sort of pattern helps keep your mind on that. As you were talking, you know, living your life fully, being engaged, being connected, is that praying unceasingly. When my husband and I first got married, his grandmother gave me a necklace, which I don't wear jewelry. So it was like, why do I have this necklace? But it's one of my favorite pieces of jewelry. It's a pewter, and it's about that big, angel. She's got gold wings, and then her body's pewter. So her wings are up and her hands are out, right? And she's holding a light. And to me, that is an image that I think of for praying unceasingly, is that we're focused on God, but we're still doing stuff. We're still living our life.
Yes.
And
Teresa Davila, you know, you are the hands and feet of God.
Right, exactly. And yeah, people just don't get that a lot of times.
We incorporate that expression from Teresa of Avila into our service, for our new interns, to help them realize that this is about incarnational living. This is about realizing that care for creation is a spiritual concern, and that creation itself has a word for them. And they, as made in God's image, have a responsibility for taking care of that creation, not just the human beings, but of all creation. And that together we make that new creation together.
Powerful.
I think we are coming up on close to an hour now. So, Sister, thank you so much for talking with us. This has been wonderful.
You're welcome.
Now I really want to get back to Swanee. Not that I don't have that feeling once a week at least, but we always like to close out in prayer. And Sister, I wonder if you would lead us in that prayer.
Certainly.
Thank you.
O God, creator of all that is, lover of our souls, our bodies, and your entire world and universes, we ask that you would break through our consciousness. Help us to be in touch with your radiant light, your healing word, your loving kindness that desires our best, that it desires the reconciliation of the world, and allows us a part in that reconciliation. Help us to take our calling, whatever that may be, and to become more fully alive, more attuned to the needs of the world, more attuned to your voice leading us, that we may witness to your presence, and that presence may bring blessing for all creation. In your name we pray. Amen.